At some point in your life, someone made you feel like the way your mind works is a problem. Maybe it was a teacher who said you were too slow to answer, even though you were thinking harder than anyone else in the room. Maybe it was a friend who called you exhausting because you needed to talk about something real instead of something easy. Maybe it was just the general low-level feeling that everyone around you moves through the world with a kind of effortless normalcy that you have never quite been able to replicate. And somewhere along the way, you started to believe it, that you were too much, too slow, too sensitive, too complicated, too inside your own head, too different in ways that cost you more than they gave you. This video is about those things, all of them, one by one. But here's what's different about today. We're not going to look at them as problems. We're going to look at what they actually are. Because there's a version of your story where everything you were criticized for is not a flaw in your character. It's a feature of your mind. And the only reason it looked like a problem is because the people around you didn't have the framework to understand what they were seeing. 8 signs. Let's go. The first one, you take too long to respond. That's how other people have described it. In conversations, in arguments, in moments where someone asked you a question and you didn't immediately fire back with an answer. There's a beat, sometimes a long one, and people fill that beat with their own interpretation. You're unsure of yourself. You're disengaged. You don't care. You're slow. Here's what's actually happening. Your brain doesn't accept incomplete information. When someone asks you something, you don't just reach for the nearest available answer. You run the question through everything you know, everything you've experienced, every angle it could be approached from. You're not slow. You're thorough in a way that most people's brains aren't wired to be. Research on cognitive processing has consistently shown that people who take longer to respond in complex situations tend to produce more accurate and more nuanced answers. The pause isn't a gap in your thinking. It's where your thinking actually happens. The people who answered immediately, they were working with less. You were working with more. It just looked different from the outside. The second sign. You get bored in situations where everyone else seems fine. The party is fine, the meeting is fine, the conversation is fine. Everyone around you is engaged, or at least performing engagement convincingly, and you're sitting there feeling a kind of flatness that you've learned to hide because you've been told, more than once, that your inability to just enjoy things is a you problem. But here's what's actually going on. Your brain has a higher threshold for what it finds genuinely stimulating. This isn't arrogance, it's neurology. Some minds are built to need more depth, more complexity, more actual content in an interaction before they register it as interesting. When that threshold isn't met, the brain doesn't just wait patiently. It starts looking for something else to do. It wanders, it disengages. It does what it needs to do to stay active. The boredom you feel isn't impatience. It's your brain telling you that what's in front of you isn't enough to occupy it. That's not a character flaw. That's a calibration. The problem was never that you got bored. The problem was that you spent years in rooms that were designed for a different kind of mind. The third sign. You feel when something is fake before you can prove it. Someone is being nice to you, and you know it's not real. You can't point to a specific thing they said or did. The words were fine, the tone was fine, the smile was fine. But something underneath all of it was off. And you felt it immediately, before your conscious mind had time to analyze anything. People have called this paranoia, oversensitivity, reading too much into things. And because you couldn't always explain it logically in the moment, you sometimes doubted yourself. Maybe you were projecting. Maybe you were wrong. Except you usually weren't. What you're doing is picking up on micro-expressions, tonal inconsistencies, behavioral patterns that don't align with what's being said. All of it processed below the level of conscious thought, faster than language. This is a real cognitive ability. It's what researchers sometimes call high emotional granularity combined with strong pattern detection. Your brain is doing genuine analytical work just in a layer you can't fully articulate in real time. The gut feeling isn't irrational. It's data. Just data your conscious mind hasn't caught up to yet. And if you think back through the times you ignored it, you probably already know how that went. If this is resonating so far, share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Not to diagnose them, just because sometimes the most useful thing is someone finally naming what's been happening. The fourth sign. You need more time alone than seems normal. Not because you don't like people, not because you're antisocial or depressed or afraid of connection, but because after a certain amount of time around other people, something in you runs out. A resource depletes, and the only thing that refills it is solitude. You probably spent a significant portion of your life feeling vaguely guilty about this, canceling plans, needing a day to recover after a weekend that everyone else seemed energized by, feeling like there's something wrong with your capacity for sustained social engagement. There isn't. What's happening is that your nervous system processes social interaction at a higher intensity than average. Every conversation, every dynamic, every subtle signal in the room, it all gets taken in and processed. And that processing has a cost. It uses something. And when that something is depleted, you don't function well. Not because you're weak, but because you've been running a more demanding operation than the people around you who still want to go to another party. The alone time isn't avoidance, it's maintenance. It's how a more complex system keeps itself functional. The people who don't need it aren't stronger, they're just running on less. The fifth sign. You get stuck on details that nobody else noticed. The conversation moved on 20 minutes ago. Everyone else is somewhere else entirely, and you're still back there on that one thing. The specific word someone used that didn't quite fit. The inconsistency in the story. The detail in the corner of the image that doesn't make sense. You can't let it go, even when you know, rationally, that it doesn't matter. This has made you seem difficult, pedantic, unable to just go with the flow. Someone who creates problems where there aren't any. But here's the other side of it. The reason you catch details nobody else noticed is because you're processing at a resolution that most people aren't. Your brain doesn't round things off the way other brains do. It keeps the full image, and sometimes, not always, but sometimes, the detail that seems irrelevant is the thing that everything else hinges on. The detail you couldn't let go of was the one that mattered. The people who go with the flow miss things. That's the trade-off. You don't miss things. The trade-off for you is that you can't always turn it off. Both of those things are true at the same time. The sixth sign. You can't always explain how you got to a conclusion. You know something. You're sure of it. But when someone asks you to walk them through your reasoning, the path isn't always clear, even to you. You arrived somewhere that feels completely obvious and solid, but the route there was partly intuitive, partly pattern-based, partly something that happened below the level of conscious step-by-step logic. And because you can't always show your work, people have questioned your conclusions, or questioned your intelligence, or assumed that if you can't explain it linearly, it probably isn't valid. But nonlinear reasoning is not the absence of reasoning. It's a different form of it. The brain that jumps, that synthesizes across domains, that lands on a conclusion through a route that looks like intuition, but is actually rapid, unconscious pattern matching. That brain is doing something cognitively sophisticated. The fact that it can't always be narrated in a straight line doesn't make the destination wrong. Some of the most accurate reads on complex situations come from exactly this kind of processing. The limitation isn't the thinking. It's the translation of the thinking into a format that sequential minds can follow. Those are two different problems, and only one of them is actually yours. The seventh sign. Surface-level conversation physically drains you. Not bores you, drains you. There's a difference, and you know it. Boredom is passive. This is active, a kind of energy leaving your body in real time as you stand there talking about nothing, performing interest you don't feel, waiting for a moment of actual contact that may or may not come. People have told you this is snobbery, that you think you're better than small talk, better than normal interaction, better than people who are just trying to connect in the way that comes naturally to them. That's not what's happening. What's happening is that your brain is built for depth, and depth requires investment from both sides. When that investment isn't available, when the conversation stays on the surface because that's where the other person is comfortable, your brain doesn't coast. It works harder, trying to find something to engage with, coming up empty, burning energy on the effort itself. It's like running in place. The motion is there, but nothing moves, and it costs more than actual forward movement would. You're not drained by people. You're drained by the gap between the conversation you're having and the one your mind is built for. And that gap, in most social situations, is real, and it is wide. Subscribe if you want more of this, honest, specific, no reassurance that isn't earned. This channel exists for the people this kind of content is actually about. The 8th sign. You live at a slightly different tempo than everyone around you. Not slower, necessarily, not faster, just different. Your processing has its own rhythm. Your emotional responses arrive on their own timeline. Your enthusiasm for things doesn't always line up with when everyone else is excited about them. You need more time with some things and less with others, and that pattern is consistent but not always predictable, even to you. This has made you seem unreliable to some people, out of step, like someone who can't keep up, or who runs ahead for no reason, or who just generally operates outside the expected rhythm of how humans are supposed to move through their days. But tempo isn't a character flaw. It's a feature of how a particular system processes the world. A mind that works at a different depth is going to work at a different speed. That's not inconsistency. That's coherence. Just coherence that isn't calibrated to the external default. The difficulty isn't that your tempo is wrong. The difficulty is that most structures, schools, offices, social schedules, the general pace of group life, were built around a different tempo, and you spent your whole life either trying to match it or feeling the friction of not being able to. Now here's what I want to say about all 8 of these things together. This isn't a compliment. It's not a list of superpowers. It's not, congratulations, you're special. Because the truth is more complicated than that. And you've probably been sold the simpler version enough times to know it doesn't actually help. What this is a description, an accurate one, of a mind that processes more, runs deeper, takes longer, needs more, and as a result has spent most of its life in a world that wasn't quite built for it. That's real. The friction was real. The exhaustion was real. The years of feeling like you were assembled slightly wrong were real. But the assembly wasn't wrong. The assembly was different. And different in this case means a specific set of things. More depth, more sensitivity, more accuracy, more cost. All of it true at the same time. The people who told you there was something wrong with you weren't lying. They were working with the only framework they had, which was the framework of their own experience. And in that framework, you looked like a problem. Because you didn't fit. Because you never quite fit. And most people, when something doesn't fit, assume the problem is with the thing, not with the container. But you were never the problem. You were just in the wrong containers for most of your life. And if you've made it to the end of this video, there's a version of you that already knew all of this, that has been carrying this knowledge quietly, without the language for it, for a very long time. Now you have the language. Do with it what you need to. And if someone in your life needs to hear this, not as an explanation, not as an argument, just as a thing to watch and sit with, send it to them. Sometimes that's enough.